Well, hello everyone. Hello again. My name is Shabnam Watson, and I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP and data consultant. I've been doing the data work for 20 years. Most of it I've been focused with analysis services, which is like the ancestor of Power BI. And then the rest of the SQL on-prem stack, and I used to code in Visual Studio. Then I moved to the dark side, to the data side over the years. And then I was focused with analysis services, Power BI. Then I did Synapse Analytics, a little bit of the pipelines. And then for the last year and a little bit more than that, I've been working with Fabric because I was part of the private preview for it. So um, seems like a long time now with the Fabric already having been out there. But most of my projects in production, they've actually been with Power BI still compared to Fabric implementations. So because I come from a developer background, of course, Power Apps was very attractive to me outside of Power BI when it became available because it was low code, no code. So I found that super cool because instead of having to code from scratch a connection to connect to a table in SQL Server and then go browse all that data, Power Apps does it for you with low code, no code. So that's why I'm interested in the Power Apps topic and, of course, Power BI, and then putting them together was interesting for me. So here's my social accounts on the screen. I would love to connect with you. The best way to connect with me is LinkedIn, or you can reach out to Greg, and if you want to get my email, you can also do that as well. I'm less and less on Twitter. A lot of our community have moved to Blue Sky, so that's where I'm more active these days as well. A little bit about some of the work that I've done in the world of Fabric. I've done some videos about updating various Fabric SQL items with Power Apps, and it's always also embedded in Power BI, although you can use it also as not embedded. And then since you guys were talking about DP700, I just want to mention I took the test and I passed it not too long ago. And I have a blog post and a video. And I share in it a spreadsheet and a Power BI report. There's a screenshot of it here on this page where you can track your progress. I did this because I studied over, I think, 2 months to get ready for it. It's a hard exam. You cannot wing it. At least most of us cannot wing it. You must study for it. So over 2 months, if you want to keep track of your studies, you can use either the Excel book, or if you're like me, like Power BI, you can import into Power BI. So that's what that is. And it's also in GitHub. So if you go to my blog, there's a link. I put the link actually to my blog post in the chat. So you can get to the GitHub and download whichever one you're interested in. And then as Greg mentioned, there is another series of Learn Together coming up that I think I'm going to be hosting one or two of those as well. Okay, so today's session, this is intended for people who are familiar with Power Apps a little bit, familiar with Power BI a little bit, and they want to put them together. So this does not go super deep into Power BI or Power Apps. This is more of an introductory session. So I'm going to talk about the use case, and then build an app or attempt to build an app. I may just show you one pre-built one based off of a table that's in Fabric SQL DB, and then show you a Power BI report that's built off of that. I know it says build, but we may open one that's already there and just walk through it for the sake of time. And then I'm going to show you how to build a similar app from the same source from Power BI service, because it changes a few things. And then we're going to talk about some of the other Fabric data sources. So I'm going to show you Fabric SQL in Fabric, SQL database in Fabric, but also talk about the warehouse towards the end. By the way, Greg, how much time do we have, just to make sure I stay on
Well,
time?
well, our user group went almost a little over 2 hours last night. So you really have as much time
Okay.
as you need, but
Okay.
there's no like
Okay.
stop time here.
All right. So if we are approaching towards the end, maybe 15 minutes, give me a heads up. Okay.
Yeah, I think you have a room of voracious learners here. So
Okay, awesome. Okay, and then
take your
also
time.
feel free to stop me and ask questions. I may not be looking at the chat, especially when I have the PowerPoint up,
Yeah,
but if you have questions, put them in the chat, and then Greg, feel free to interrupt me.
I will bubble them
Okay.
up. Yep, I will definitely do that.
All right. So starting with the use case. So this particular um, using power instance of putting Power Apps, embedded Power Apps visual in a Power BI report, and then enabling write back to the source and having the page refresh automatically has a very specific use case. So the use case is this. The use case is that you have a SQL enabled data source. It can be Azure SQL database, it can be SQL Server on-prem, or in our case, it can be Fabric SQL SQL database in Fabric. Then you have a Power BI report that's built off of this data source. And then you have a Power App that you want to use to write back to your data source. So it's a very specific use case. This does not work with, what I'm going to show you end to end, it doesn't work with SharePoint. You can do it with SharePoint, but the automatic page refresh part doesn't work quite the same. Okay, so Power Apps is part of Power Platform. It's a low-code, no-code environment to creating applications. It has evolved over the years. It's got more and more capabilities built in. And as you can see, by the way, Power BI is also part of Power Platform. If you go to the Power Platform conference, Power BI is part of it. If you go to Microsoft Fabric conference, Power BI is part of it. So this slide is from the Power Platform family of products. And this is the Power Apps Studio as of today. This changed in the last couple of months. Power Apps Studio is getting more and more AI features built into it, so it changes every couple of months. So to get started with Power Apps, if you have never used it, you go to make.powerapps.com, and that brings up the studio where you can create applications. And a great way to get started with Power Apps is to use the templates. And that's how I learned. It used to have a template that would create this three-screen application that you could even put on your phone that would connect to a simple data source, and you can see the records, update the records, delete the records. And then one thing that's super nice about Power Apps is that its language, PowerFX, is super easy to be transferred from one place to another. So you can Google PowerFX and easily adapt it to your code versus Googling DAX. Good luck. You can't really reuse it easily. But PowerFX is super easy to use. So what you can do is if you're just starting, is to start a template app, and then you open up another browser and you start from scratch, and then you can copy and paste almost very, very easily. So having said that, the template apps have changed since a few months ago. A few months ago, the three-screen app, which was one of their easiest applications, is no longer here. At least I couldn't find it. So for that one, I'm going to show you one that I've built before. And if you want to see the code for it, of what I'm going to show you, all of it is on my blog, a couple of blog posts as well. As far as the Power Apps licenses, so when you embed a Power Apps visual in Power BI, even when you're embedding it in Power BI, the person who opens up the report has to have the Power Apps license. And for most data sources, you don't need to have a paid license as long as your user is part of your Office 365 ecosystem. They can access Power Apps. So for example, for SharePoint, you don't need to have a paid license. But for anything that talks SQL, so as soon as you say SQL, that's when you need to have a premium license. And unlike Power BI, it's not capacity based. So every person who creates an app and every person who opens the app to use it must have a license. So a little bit different than Power BI pricing model. And again, this changes over time. So as of today, this was still valid, what you see on the screen, but always go to the link to check and see what has changed. This particular pricing model sometimes has kept some people back because it can get expensive depending on the number of users that you have, but you have to think about this, that you're not hiring professional developers. This is citizen developers. Low code, no code can get a lot of work done. So it's always a pros and cons when it comes to the cost and maintenance that you have to think through. But I personally love Power Apps because it saves me so much time. And then there's another kind of license that's available. But if you go to let me go back to the previous slide. If you just go to the Power Apps pricing, it doesn't show you. But if you go to the Azure portal or Office 365 portal, there is a per app, which is only $5. So let's say you have a user that only wants to access one app, and that's it. You don't have to get them one of the more expensive licenses. It's just $5, but it's only for one app. That's the difference. The other license that was on the previous screen, this is for unlimited apps. Okay, so now going to Power BI. Power BI is part of Microsoft Fabric. And one of the things that's on this slide that you may have not seen it, although I know was announced at the FabCon. So it's the SQL databases in Fabric, which is this purple icon here. They bring the OLTP workloads to Microsoft Fabric. So Fabric is an end-to-end analytics platform for AI, because now there's AI at the bottom of all of these workloads. All of these, you have access to Copilot to assist you, although there's a cost to it. The cost is not necessarily as you use it, but it's the cost is in a capacity model. So the AI workloads consume some of your capacity. So then you may have to scale up. So Data Factory is for ETL. The blue icon is for the warehouse and the lakehouse workloads that come from the Synapse background. Real-time intelligence is for streaming data. It's super powerful for real-time analytics. And then we have Power BI. That's for the BI workloads. Now, the SQL databases addition to Microsoft Fabric was super important because that's the true OLTP engine. The warehouse and the lakehouse are not meant to be for OLTP engines. They're for analytical workloads. They're super powerful, but they're not for OLTP. So this SQL database in Fabric is exactly like Azure SQL database. So it brings to you all the capabilities of Azure SQL database, but in a software as a service model. So you no longer have to go to the Azure portal and provision it, set up networking and all that. And as you're going to see, you just go to your Power BI workspace if it's enabled for Fabric, and you just say, give me a new database, and there it is. So all in all, it's very powerful. Okay, so
quick question, Shabnam, and
yes.
just to validate, back to the Power Apps pricing. If you have the per app pricing and you have an app that's in a dev and a prod environment, would that require 2 per app licenses?
Ooh, I don't know. Probably it does. I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that question.
No, I know the answer to that. It's the one license would work.
One license.
For both. Yeah.
The $5
$5
one. The $5 one.
The per app one.
Yeah, I don't know how it tracks it. I don't know if it tracks it by the app ID. It may complain about it. I haven't done that. I have the $20 one myself because I work with so many apps.
Oh, I got the answer. Hold on. I just Googled it. Power Apps per app plan allows individual users to run one application or one portal for a specific business area in a specific environment. I thought it was any environment. So yeah, if you have 2 different environments, Mark. you would need 2 different licenses.
Still might be cheaper than the $20 one.
Yeah, and typically if somebody's using it, right,
So,
like you wouldn't give them access to dev.
Yeah, actually, one thing that's not on these slides is that there is this one, look at this one, there is a developer plan that's completely free. So you can use the developer plan for a lot of things. And as long as you're not using it to, publish production apps for your business, it's fine. Okay, so well, thank you for looking up the answer too, Greg.
Of course.
Okay, so this is what the Fabric portal looks like, but I know that you're all familiar with Fabric because it's a Fabric user group, so I'm just going to go past this one. Let me ask everybody, does anybody have any questions about the capacity model of Fabric, how the pricing of Fabric works?
We're about to talk for the rest of the user group about licensing.
Okay.
Just kidding. We had
So,
somebody raise their hand.
Yes.
Do you want to come off mute?
Or I don't know if they just had a...
Yeah.
Hi.
I was saying, yes, I'm interested in that.
Okay, so the pricing for Fabric works. It's a capacity model. So you pay for a capacity. It starts from an F2 and it goes up from there. And as long as you have a capacity, it gives you a certain amount of compute and memory and storage. Then you can throw in as many workloads on it as you want. It's not per workload. Now, the only item that you need to have a different license to create is Power BI. So whoever is going to publish a Power BI report, regardless of what capacity they're working on, or even if they're not working with the capacity, they're working with a pro license only, then they have to have a Power BI license. The rest of the items you don't need to have a separate license for. So it's a simple model because you can throw in all of your workloads into the same capacity, and typically it gives you cost savings compared to a model where you would have had all of these services in separate Azure workloads. So if you have currently an Azure SQL database and you have Azure Data Factory, Databricks, you have a Synapse dedicated pool or serverless, all of them separately are consuming, resources, and there is a cost that goes with them. And there's a lot of times when there is white space. So for example, your data factory, maybe, the older model is that your pipelines run during the non-business hours, and during the business hours, only people are opening up your reports or querying your databases. So if you combine them together, then you can throw all that workload into a capacity, and then there's some cost savings to that. So hopefully that answered a little bit. We can talk about it at the end if you want to stay longer. Okay, so SQL database in Fabric. This is the data source that I'm going to be showing you. So when you create a SQL database in Fabric, it gives you 3 items. What you see here is that I created a SQL database called Fabric SQL DB. I like to call my items, I like to give them verbose names so that I don't forget what they are when I'm trying to connect to them from a different tool like Management Studio or Power BI Desktop. So when I create this Fabric SQL DB, I get 2 other items with it. So I did not explicitly ask for them. They just show up. So the 2 items that show up with it are a semantic model and a SQL Analytics endpoint. Now, this Fabric SQL DB itself is exactly like an Azure SQL database, but wrapped in a software as a service. It's feature comparable to an Azure SQL database. So some of the Fabric workloads they have been rewritten. So for example, the lake house or the warehouse that you see in Fabric are not the same warehouse and the serverless or dedicated SQL pool that you had in Synapse Analytics. They have been revamped, rewritten entirely from scratch. But some of the workloads have been brought in exactly as they were outside. So Fabric SQL DB is one of those. It's exactly Azure SQL DB, but in a software as a service. So the good news is that if you have Power Apps applications that are working with Azure SQL DB, all you have to do is to change the connection string, of course, bring in your objects into Fabric SQL DB, and they will work. But with like a warehouse, you can't do that. You cannot bring your objects from Azure SQL database, let's say with a pipeline, put them in a warehouse, connect your Power Apps to it and work. There's some things that are different. Okay, so the first item is that Azure SQL database. The other two, one of them is a default Power BI model that Fabric creates for reporting purposes. And it's the default one, so you don't have some controls that you would have normally over a semantic model, but regardless, it's there. It's really good for a quick QA of your data. And then there's this other thing down here that it looks like a warehouse. So this is a SQL Analytics endpoint. So what's happening is that the data from the Fabric SQL database, which remember is the Azure SQL database, it gets almost mirrored. So it gets in near real time, it gets written to the OneLake, and then it's provided for analytics in a read-only method through the SQL Analytics endpoint. So I'm going to stay on this slide for a couple of minutes and see if there are any questions. So because this is important when we go to work with Power Apps, because the connection string for this Fabric SQL database and its mirrored SQL Analytics endpoint are two different things. And you have to keep in mind that you can only write to one of them. You cannot write to the SQL Analytics endpoint. So depending on the application that you're going to design and work with, that may or may not matter. If you have an app, Power Apps that, let's say, for example, is just looking up a value, then you can use a SQL Analytics endpoint. But if you want to use it to update the source, then you must the Power Apps must hit this Fabric SQL database. And when it comes to your Power BI report, you have a choice then. The Power BI report can hit the Fabric SQL database, or it can hit the analytics one. Now it becomes again, that's another design decision. Do you want to point your Power BI report to your OLTP database, or do you want to point it to your OLAP database? Okay, so I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions.
Hey, Shabnam, really quickly, not to derail, could Writeback work to Dataverse, back to Dataverse, as opposed to SQL? I mean, and we can talk offline, but I was just.
Yeah. I have not done it myself, but I know that it works. So
Okay.
I've seen people do it. You can also write back to a SharePoint list. The part that doesn't work, I'll show you in the next slide. The part that doesn't work is the automatic page refresh. Is the part where you want to go on your Power BI report, open the app, do something, and then see the changes immediately reflected in your Power BI report, because that requires direct query or direct lake that you can get with SharePoint or some of the data sources, but the rest of it works.
We got another question in the chat. Can we set up the capacity to stop creating default semantic models when creating a Fabric item?
That's a great question. I wish. Not that I know of. At least I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that feature. I think there was at some point I heard that there were requests about it, but I don't know where that request is at all. Initially, you may think of it as it's cluttering, but one thing that you have to keep in mind, one thing that this default semantic model is good for is a real quick, you throw all your tables in and you just want to do a quick QA with it. At least that's what I do. Okay. So with the Power Apps, this is a typical setup with Power Apps with the Fabric SQL database. So the Power Apps is writing to the Fabric SQL database, and then the default semantic model is with the SQL works off of the SQL Analytics endpoint. And you have to keep in mind that when this says near real time, it is not instant. So there is a couple of seconds. Sometimes there can be 15 seconds of delay till the data is actually reflected in your SQL Analytics endpoint. So if you have a Power Apps, you're updating the data, you're refreshing, it's in direct query, but you're not seeing the changes. That's because there's a delay. Okay. All right. So the write-back use case, this is regardless of the SQL data source. With any SQL data source, and the reason I say SQL data source, it's because we want the report to be in direct query storage mode, which I'll talk about if you haven't used it before, okay? So we have a report, and we want to add the Power Apps visual to it, and we want the person who has the in Power BI report, while they're in Power BI report, they want to update a value, click on update, it sends the data to the backend. Then we want that same action, we want it to refresh all of the visuals. So without the user clicking on the page refresh or the refresh visuals icon in Power BI service. So we want the person to just click on update, write back, refresh the visuals, and then see the data. Okay, so this is the use case. Now, you don't have to have all the pieces, obviously. If the page refresh part doesn't matter, then you can go with an import mode. So you update the data, and then the results show up later. So there are some cases where, for instance, there are people who want to update product category labels, let's say for a warehouse, and it doesn't matter if those updates are not seen for like the next hour. Okay, and then real quick about Power BI licenses. For the person who creates and the person who publishes a Power BI report, regardless of where that Power BI report is going, must have a Pro or Premium per user license. So you must have one of these licenses in order for you to be able to publish it. Once you publish it, depending on the workspace that it went to, your consumers may be able to open it for free, or they may also have to have corresponding licenses. So for the full licensing, I have the link down here, or we can talk about it later again at the end. All right, so Power BI table storage modes. So when you create a Power BI report, it has some visualizations in it, but it also has what's called a semantic model that defines relationships between different entities in your report. This semantic model may or may not have data in it. So depending on the table storage mode, the data either stays in the backend or it's actually moved to your Power BI desktop or later on to Power BI service. So the way you do that is that in Power BI desktop, when you go to get data, you find your source, and then you decide at that point, it will ask you, do you want the table to be in import mode or direct query? Now, import is the best choice storage mode in most cases. It gives you the best performance because it moves the data into the Writeback engine, which is Power BI's columnar storage engine. It's like cluster column store index sizes like Parquet and Delta format is really good for analytical queries. And once the data comes into the Writeback engine, whether in Power BI desktop or the service, from that point on, when people interact with the report or they refresh the page, their queries go to the engine. They don't go to the backend anymore. So If you're working with Power Apps and that's embedded in an import mode Power BI report, your Power Apps can update the data all you want, but you will not see the changes immediately. You have to wait for the next data refresh. So that's why this topic is relevant. So opposite import is direct query. With direct query, the data stays in the data source, and Power BI, the Power BI model is only metadata, so it knows how to form those joins, send it back to the data source. So because of that, it's near real time. Now, always, it's interesting because with direct queries, it's I don't know why they call it near real time, because it's as soon as you refresh, your query is answered by the backend. So it's, to me, the direct query is real time. But the next one, the direct lake, is near real time. So direct lake is the newest storage mode. It gives you the best of both worlds. So it gives you the performance of import with the near real time of direct query. Now, this direct lake is near real time because if data changes, there is a delay of, if there can be a delay of a few seconds. It's not milliseconds, it's a few seconds for you to see the data. So the way direct lake works is that, again, the data does not move, but the reason that it gives you the performance of import is because the Power BI team has redesigned the Power BI's engine so that it natively uses the Delta files in the OneLake as its own storage engine. So in this particular storage mode, when people interact with the report, the data goes directly to the files in OneLake. Now, one thing that's important to note is that there's no SQL layer in here anymore. It just goes straight to the lake. And that's the revolutionary part about this storage mode, is that you no longer are translating data to SQL to get data back from your backend. Okay, so back to Power Apps and Power BI. So Power Apps is one of the default visuals in Power BI. It's been for a long time. And you put it on your canvas, and then there is a function called Power BI integration.refresh that you call from your application to trigger the page refresh. So I'll show you this in a few minutes. So once you put the visual on your canvas, it's actually gives you a lot of good information. You can follow the steps pretty easily. One thing I wanted to point out is that there's a drop down at the top that sometimes it's hard to see, where you choose your environment. So if you're working in a real organization, you typically have more than one Power Apps environment, so you want to choose the correct environment. And then you can choose something that you have created before, or you can create a new application. If you choose something that you have created before, it will not work properly unless it was created from Power BI service. So if you have a Power Apps that's working, you can embed it in Power BI, but it will not interact with your Power BI report. It will work on its own, but it will not be able to receive data from your Power BI report. So in order to do that, you must start the process from Power BI service. Okay, so I'm going to go to demo, and while I'm pulling up the demo, Greg, if there are any questions, we can
No questions so
answer them.
far.
Okay,
I was saying
all right.
that is such a key thing to know, to start it from Power BI.
Yes. So if you make it to, if you're creating your Power Apps and you make it to Power Apps and then you get those red squiggly lines, chances are you did not start from Power BI service, not even Power BI desktop. In Power BI desktop, it looks like it's going to work, but it will not work. So let me bring up Power BI desktop first and show you. So in here, the visual is actually here, and you can add it and choose your fields. I'll just throw in a couple of fields so that this gets activated here. and then it goes to get the environment, and then you can create the app. It looks like it's gonna work, but it will not be able to interact properly, and it will not be able to do that page refresh, the automatic page refresh, which is the key. It's the key to this particular use case. Again, maybe for some people, you don't care if your user has to click on the refresh button. Okay, so instead of doing this, I'm not going to finish this here. Instead of doing this, what you want to do is you want to publish this to Power BI service and then go and edit it from there. Okay. So let's go to, first of all, let's go to the Power BI Fabric / Power BI. So whether you go to powerbi.com or the Fabric address, it all lands in the same place. As long as your Power BI admin has enabled the Fabric features, or in other words, if they have not disabled them, because usually that's the case, because it has already been deployed everywhere in the world, but some organizations have decided not to enable it. So when you go to Fabric, you have /Power BI, you have workspaces, and within the workspace, you can create a number of different items. So if I go here and I say new item, I can create any of these things that you see here as a pipeline, event stream, data flows gen 2, and all sorts of things. And as long as I'm covered by a capacity, then I'm good. It doesn't matter how many of these workloads I throw in, as long as I don't go over my capacity by a significant amount, it's the same fixed price for me. Okay. All right, so one of those items is a Fabric SQL database. So this is what I was showing you screenshot of before. Now, the connection string for this Fabric SQL database and this item, the SQL Analytics endpoint, is different. So depending on which one you want to work with, you need to pay attention to that. So if you go to your Fabric SQL database and you get this gear from here, under the connection string, this is where you can get the connection. So from this TCP from here all the way to where it says .NET, this is what you want to put in Power Apps. When I was trying Power Apps, I cannot get this 1433 to work, so I have to try it without. And then the other thing that I wanted to pay attention to is that the initial catalog, which is like the database name, see how it has the name? This is the name that I gave it, Fabric SQL DB, but it has this long GUID at the end of it. So that is the database name that you need. So even though in the portal, when you look at it in the portal, it doesn't show you that, but that's the actual database name, has that long GUID behind it. And if you connect from Management Studio, which I'll bring this here to show you. So let's see. If I open this one, we're going to see, okay, here we go. So this is the Azure SQL database with the long name. So from Management Studio, you can see the long name. So when you're creating your Power Apps application, you need to pay attention to these. And remember that this is the read write. So if you're trying to write to this top one and it's failing, that's because this is a read-only one. Now, this one, the mirrored version actually does not have the GUID behind it. Just has the name that you give it. And another way you can tell that this is the SQL Analytics endpoint is because it has the data warehouse in it. And I didn't notice actually before I started working with the SQL database and Fabric, but each Power BI or Fabric workspace has only one SQL Analytics endpoint. So notice that this wasn't on that item that I was looking at. This is just another warehouse. It's not even a SQL Analytics endpoint. It's just another warehouse that I have in the same workspace. but it shows up. So, okay. So going back to the portal. So here, I'll just show you one of the tables first. So I have a table called Dim product category for Power Apps. I've just created a copy of the product category table. And the use case is I go in here, I update it, then I want to see the changes in my Power BI report as well, and then in an app that I embed in it. So if I go here to product category, just making sure that this is the same. So 2, 3, 4, because I was updating these to make sure 2, 3, 4. Yep, I think I need to run my 2, 3, 4, 5. And here 2, 3. Let me refresh this to make sure I'm on the same data source. 2, 3, 4. I may be off by 1. The category, I may be on this other table. It's just okay here. Two, 3, 4, 5. And 2, 3, 4. I think I'm on a slightly different data source. Here's my demo breaking, my Power Apps demo breaking. Okay, so all right, I'll show it from here. So this is the app. And if I go in here and I type 56, 56, 56, and then I do a save, it updates the page immediately. So notice I didn't have to go and hit this refresh icon here or the one that's up here, the page refresh. It does it for me automatically, right? So if I go back, it updates instantly. So this is the use case, okay? Now, the way you edit this is by, or you create it the first time, is by editing your Power BI report, adding the visual into it, and then from that point on, if you want to make changes to the Power Apps, to the Power Apps visual, you have to do it from the Power BI service. Okay, so this takes it a second and will take me to the Power Apps Studio. Okay, so this app has 2 screens, but what's important is this guy here, Power BI integration. If you start from the Power Apps directly, you will not get this Power BI integration. Everything else is the same, but you just won't get that one, okay? So if I go to the make.powerapps.com and if I find this one, so this one is from Power BI service, this one is directly from Power Apps. Okay, so let me open this one and we can look at this one.
FYI, we've got some questions in the chat whenever you have a good time to pause.
Sure, go for them.
Okay, first one. What happens when one user is making an update to a category in the SQL backend at the same time a Power BI end user is making an update to the same category on the front end? Is there like conflict resolution, conflict management?
So the answer is whatever your backend like isolation is set to, transaction isolation is set to. It's no different than two people running two different updates from Management Studio. So you open up Management Studio, I open up Management Studio, and we try to write at the same time, or I try to read and you're writing. So so it all depends on your backend is handling it. Whether it's going to delay, it's going to block your write from Power Apps. It all depends on how your backend ACID compliance is.
Yeah. Next question. Rich is saying Writeback is new to him. What are the typical business use cases for Writeback? Like, is it cleaning data, updating inventory?
Yeah, so some things are, so use cases are, for example, categories. So you want to update product categories like labels, or I've seen use cases where people are adding notes. So they're reviewing, for example, medical records and they want to add a note. So it's not really it's not, at least the use cases of Power Apps that I've worked with, they have not been for high transactional systems. They have been a mix of somewhere between reporting and transactional. They have not been purely transactional systems, but I've seen it for comments, feedback, and not so like applications that are, let's say you have a sales application that you're updating a few times in a day. So those are the cases I work with.
So one of the ones I see a lot is like planning and forecasting. And so like if you have actuals, like an actuals column, and then you have like a forecasted column, that's something people would want to update.
Like what if, right?
Yeah. And then like if you have like project level reporting, if you want to change statuses, that's also a good Writeback use case. And then the third question, can you use the Power App visual within a tooltip? Oh, that's a good one. And will it have the same functionality as you were to just embed it within a normal Power BI page?
Ooh, I've never done that either. That's interesting. No, I don't know.
Ben, you're getting real squirrely with us. Cheaper than a CDP. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite interesting.
That is all the questions for now.
Yeah, because like by the way, the Power Apps does not have to be a Writeback Power Apps. It can look up something. It doesn't necessarily have to have the Writeback. So if it's just bringing something back then for the tooltip, that would be really cool.
Sounds
I
like
have
Ben,
to
you're
try.
gonna have to. Ben's gonna go figure it out, and he's gonna present, and you and I can
Yes.
watch.
Yep. Okay. So now I lost where I was, but
sorry.
Here we go. It's okay. Let's go back to. So these are the more advanced apps. I don't want to get back into them, but I want to go back to the Power BI workspace. So let's go back one step into, if I go to my workspace, just give me 1 second to find the direct query model from SQL DB, no Power Apps. So this would be a starting point. This is the starting point. Okay, I saved some starting points here. So hopefully one of these is still, nope, that one didn't work. Just give me 1 second to find. Okay, so this is a clean one. And to make sure that this is a good one, what I want to do is I want to check let me see if I can check the lineage on this one. And yes, demo, starting points. Okay. Okay, so let's say that for this one, I want to add in I want to create a Power Apps. Okay, so let's do that real quick. If I go here, I'm entering the edit mode. I add the Power Apps visual and follow the instructions on it. And I'm going to go to, let's say I just want to play with the product category table. So I'm going to choose all the fields that I want my app to work with. I'm in the correct environment, and I'm going to say create new. So this will take me to
No, this is amazing.
Power Apps. I don't know if someone said something or someone's mic
I heard them
was
say
on.
I heard somebody say this is amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so this takes you to Power Apps. Now, again, if you do the same thing from Power Apps, the only thing that's missing is this Power BI integration library that's missing. So what happens is that it creates only one screen for you. It's not very pretty, but it puts an interesting visual here. It's called a gallery. So a gallery, the way gallery works is that you always work with the first card on it. If you resize that, everything else is going to resize. So for the first card, what I did was I copied and pasted the field that it picked. So it randomly picked something. It had randomly picked product category name, but I'm going to change this to the second one. I want to add product category key. So now we have two fields. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to have the user select this one and go to the next screen. Again, you can just have one screen as well, doesn't matter. So for now, I'm going to create a second screen. I'm going to add a form screen, and by default, it puts a form visual on it. So there's a form here, although it's all white background, so you don't see it. So once you make it to the second screen, if you change your mind, you want to click up here and you want to go back. So these navigation functions are like, they're like PowerPoint. And while I'm in the editor, if I do Alt click, I can test this. So it should take me back. Nope. Okay. Hold on. Let's go back here to the gallery. If we select this one, it's going to select the parent, which is the gallery. And then on select, I am going to navigate to screen 2. So I'm just fixing the navigation right now. Okay. So this is the navigation, and I also like to change the color of this gallery. If we go to the second screen, I'm going to say save your changes. So just building the framework here. And then on the second screen, we have a form. So a form has two important properties. It has a data source that we need to set, and it has an item. So data source is where the form is going to write to. So Power Apps knows how to write a SQL update statement for us once we connect it to a data source. So I'm going to say add data, choose a SQL data source, and you choose SQL Server regardless of whether you're working with Azure SQL DB or any other SQL data source. You just choose SQL Server. So for this one, I'm putting in the connection string for the Fabric SQL database itself, the read-write one, not the replica. And then I'm going to say connect, and this gives me the list of tables that I want to work with. Now, notice that there's also store procedure here. The nice thing about store procedure is that if you're working with a data source that does not support what Power Apps issues in the backend, which is a patch function, I will show you what code actually goes in the backend. It's like SP execute update. If it doesn't support it, like the Fabric Warehouse, then what you want to do is you want to have a stored procedure called instead. And also, if you want to add in error handling, logging, or number of things, basically, if you want to have more control over the writes, then you want to do a store procedure. So for here, I'm going to choose product category and then say connect. So this creates a connection. There's still nothing in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here, choose the table, and then from the table, I'm going to choose the fields. So one thing that may be confusing here is that this form is not connected to Power BI. We are on the second screen. So just remember, on the first screen, the gallery is receiving its data from Power BI. The gallery, if you look there, it's items, or where are you? Yes, here. Item says Power BI integration.data. So it's receiving its items from Power BI. But when we go to write it, we can't go through Power BI anymore. We're going to the back end directly. So that's why I had to add that data source to the form. So from this point on, the form knows how to issue an update statement. So if I click on this check mark here, the formula here is submit form, and that's all we need from Power Apps. Power Apps knows how to do that update statement from us, which is fantastic. So from here, once we save the changes, then we want to navigate back and then call Power BI integration.refresh. So this is the key. If you make it here and this is squiggly marks, that's because you have arrived here from the wrong path. So you have to fix your path and redo your code. Okay, so this is done as far as saving, but the problem right now is that if we come from the first screen to the second screen, there's nothing in our form and the user has to enter everything from scratch. We don't want that. So what we're going to do is that we're going to click on the form and set a different property, which is its item property. And for this one, we're going to say gallery1.selected. So now whatever is selected in gallery 1 is going to show up here. Okay, and then we can play the app from here and make sure that the navigation works. Okay, I'm going to stop that. And one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a nice header.
Yeah.
So if we go.
Oh, sorry, Shabnam, really quickly. So just
Yes.
to make sure I'm understanding this, on that first page, you are connecting to a data source. And then this next page, the other page, that was for the, you're also connected. So there's two connections. Is
There's
that correct?
two connections. Yes.
Okay.
Now, if you were creating this in purely in Power Apps, there would be one connection.
Just one connection. Okay.
Yes, yeah. But this one, your gallery is receiving its items from Power BI integration because you want the gallery, you want your Power Apps to interact with your Power BI report. And then when it goes to write it, then we want it to show the items from the first screen, but it writes it to the backend directly. Okay, and for that you have to add the connection. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so the only thing from here is I like to take this rectangle from here and paste this. This is very much like, in terms of usability, is very much like PowerPoint copy and pasting. It's very easy to move things around. That's why even if you make a mistake, you can open two tabs next to each other and almost copy and paste. So for this one, I'm going to say choose an item. Just give it a label. Okay. So once you have your app the way you like it, then you want to save it. I'm going to call this app 1, and then you want to publish it. Until you publish it, it's not available to other people other than yourself. And then of course, there's a little bit of a, not CI/CD, but there's lifecycle management, a software lifecycle management going on. Which I don't know why this is not coming up. Control Shift P. Let me try that one. No, it's not coming up. Okay, but it doesn't matter right now because I'm the only person working with it. And then please save it to Power Apps. I did. Right. Hope we didn't lose the app. Okay, let me see if I can do this again. And then it's not playing nicely. So you would share it with others. So before, even though you embedded in a Power BI report and it has been published, you have to share the app to other people for them to be able to use it. If someone opens up the report and the app has not been shared with them, it will tell them that, sorry, you don't have access to this app. And then there's a button they can click on and get permissions to. So let's go back to the report, and hopefully as soon as I go back here, it should populate it back. So we go, and now the app is in here. So if we did everything correctly, this should receive data from it. So as I click on the Power Apps visuals, this is receiving data. It's getting filtered. It cannot filter data back, but it can receive data. And then if I go in here, choose an app, and let's put some numbers in here. And then click on save. If we did everything correctly, it should update the values and then refresh the page automatically.
And from a
Any
security
questions?
perspective, that's all handled then in that. So in the Power BI environment, so whatever user is interacting with that data, that's the data that they have access to. Is that abstracted? Like I don't have to worry about that from a Power App perspective. It's all handled in Power BI. It's the security.
Yes, because the data that the Power Apps is receiving is coming from the Power BI.
Okay.
From the Power BI data. That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Again, I have a quick question. Like if you have two personas, first persona is just a read only in the Power BI or Power App. I can only view the items. And the second persona is someone actually have access to actually edit or add a comments. How would you differentiate on the UI itself? Like different UI for different user, or you let the user try to edit it and then it just give him an error? What would be like your best practice?
So I've seen you can either, I mean, it totally depends on your requirements or how much tolerance your users have. They can go and try to edit, and you can let it fail and handle the errors. There's error handling, you can catch the errors. Or you can detect the user, and based on that, you can show them different things. So in that scenario, your Power Apps needs to have security built in. So I've seen that where it's the same application, but depending on who opens it up, it behaves different. But in that case, you have to maintain some kind of user table so that you can figure out the roles. But I personally don't think it's a good user experience to let them to attempt to save and then fail them. I think it might be better to somehow disable the button for them or pop a message before they attempt it, if you have that use case. Or, alternatively, you can have two different reports entirely for two different audiences. So one is for people who want to just see the data. Okay. So was there another question, or is that, I think that might be an old message in the
It was
chat.
an old message.
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so this is the use case. All right. And going back to I'm gonna show you two other apps that are a little bit different. So this is again similar, but this is working off of the this is working with the Direct Lake. So the storage mode for the Power BI model behind this one is Direct Lake. So if I update something here, even though I triggered a page refresh, the report doesn't show the changes immediately because there's a delay. So if this is your use case, then what you can do is you can build in some delay into the app. So this is a different app that I've built in, very similar to the previous one, but this one has a delay built into it. So if I do this and I click on save, so this is a little bit different. This is not the same form that you saw before. It looks like it, but when I click on save, now I have a nice visual popping up that basically I'm injecting delay in it, hoping that I will get that window covered. Although keep in mind that the delay is not an exact amount. So depending on your system, it may be 15 seconds or 30 seconds. It's not a guaranteed number of seconds that you can plan around, but you can do something like this, and I can show you how I've done this. So the first app that I showed you is like an introductory app where you just updating, there's not much to it. And see, like in this case, we didn't catch it. Okay, actually it's refreshing now. Let's see what happens. And my SQL analytics endpoint may have gone to sleep. So this still, I didn't catch it, but now it goes. So I need a little bit more time. So if I show you this app in Power Apps, then from here you will see I've done a little bit more design around this app where it still has two screens, but on the second app, on the second screen, what I'm doing, I'm not using that check mark. Instead, so again, I have the gallery on the first page, and on the second page, if you see here, I still have a form. So there's still the form, but I'm not clicking on that check mark. I have a button here. And when someone clicks on this button, I'm playing with a bunch of flags. So these are basically my variables. I'm just saying reset these variables. So these are my variables. I'm toggling them. And then there is a timer here on the screen as well. That's hidden, so you don't see it. It's down here. If I do this, you see this one. And then my actual visual, that the graphics that showed up that says mirroring is happening, please wait. That's also somewhere on this screen, but it's hidden because its visibility is set to an actual function instead of true or false. So that image is also here, but you don't see it. When you click on save, it pops up. The way you control the flow in Power Apps is that you toggle the visibility. And then the timer is kind of tricky. It's not like a timer that in the code you can say timer start, timer stop. It's a bit more challenging than that. Again, all of the code is in my blog. If you want to go see it, you have to basically just toggle it. So that's why as soon as someone gets onto this screen on invisible and on hidden, you see that I play with these timer values here. So I just say reset timer true, reset timer false. So I toggle it to reset the timer, and then timer go at the end of it, I set it to false. So by doing that, I make it look like when you click it, the time is going on and all that. Okay. So once you get past some of the basic app designs, you don't have to use the forms anymore. What you can do is you can directly have a label. So there's a bunch of controls in here. And then as soon as you have a label on the screen, you can go say Power BI.integration dot, and then it has IntelliSense and it's going to bring up your fields for you. And then you can go after one particular field. So you can create a free format application instead of being tied to the forms. Forms are really good to get started with, but then you can graduate from forms. You can even have an application that's just on one screen. You don't need to have multiple screens, especially when you're embedding in Power BI. Okay, so I'm going to go back to slides and just show you something about the warehouse or cases where you may want to work with a data source that's SQL-based still, but it doesn't take the submit form function. So the function that I was showing you is submit form, and it knows how to write to the backend, but it doesn't work with all data sources, okay? Before we do that, just remember the order of the operation matters. So you have to publish your report to the service, you have to edit it from the service, add the visual, then create your app, save it, and share it. If you don't do this, some of the features may not work. The Power Apps visual has some limitations. This may have changed. Maybe it's now supported in other browsers, but if you see some weird behavior, it could be due to some of its limitations, okay? This Power BI integration, the refresh, if you have an existing app and you go and try to put that in it, it's not going to work. You have to, for the first time, you have to create your app from Power BI service. Now, once you create it from Power BI service, you can reuse it in your future Power BI reports. As long as they're using the same data source, you can reuse it. But the first time, it has to be from Power BI service. Okay, now this submit form does all the heavy lifting, and it works for a lot of data sources, but not for all. So one of those is the Fabric warehouse or the SQL Analytics endpoint, because the SQL Analytics endpoint of any item that you see in Fabric is also a mini warehouse. So a Lakehouse comes with a SQL Analytics endpoint. The Fabric SQL database comes with the SQL Analytics endpoint. The real-time intelligence items that you also create, they come with the SQL Analytics endpoint. Any one of those and the warehouse. If you try to create the same app that I showed you and you do submit form, you get an error like what you see on the screen. And it's not very clear, just as network error. And I knew it wasn't right because I knew I could connect to it. I can see the data, so I knew it was a network error. So, and it says using the patch function. So patch is a more advanced form of submitting updates. So submit form is the easiest way, but you can use the patch function also in Power Apps to do that. But regardless, when you use submit form, it uses patch behind the scenes, and patch uses something else behind the scenes it calls SV execute SQL. So this is a sample SQL that it would submit to update a product category name, in fact, sales, for example. So it says set the column name to the value, and the value is at the end. But what some of the data sources don't like is this output parameter, or parameter is not the right word. It's something else I forget right now, but there's an output field that goes with this SV execute SQL. This is not supported in the warehouse, and this throws an error. So if you want to work with the warehouse or the SQL Analytics endpoint, then what you can do is instead call a store procedure. So you create the store procedure that you like, and then when you're creating the connection, when I showed you the list of tables, there was also the store procedures. You pick the store procedure, and then you can call the store procedure in your Power Apps by using a collection. So collection in Power Apps has different use cases. One of them is that you can call the store procedure even though in this particular store procedure, we're not returning any data, we're just using it to call to update the data. And this is the format that you see on the screen. So clear collect is just best practice because you're clearing your collection from before. Okay, so that's it. So that's a trick to get it to work for the data sources that don't support the output parameter of the SV execute SQL. So with that, that's the end of what I wanted to show you.
Turn on your camera and let's give Shabnam a round of applause. Thank you for that awesome presentation.
Thank you.
And the demo
Hopefully you
gods were
guys-
on your side.
Thank you.
That was awesome.